Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Meals for Students with Insufficient Funds and Local Meal Charge Policies. My name is Vonda Cook. I will be presenting today's webinar. However, I am joined by Robert Tomaine, PDE Legal Counsel, and Danielle Mariano, Bureau Director for Budget and Fiscal Management in the Department of Education, Jen Jarrett, and Cecilia Bodie from the Division of Food and Nutrition. Questions can be typed into the chat box. We will do our best to address as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Guidance will be updated as necessary to address questions. On November 6, 2017, Act 55 was enacted and amended Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania Public School Code. The effective date was 30 days from the date of enactment, which was December 6th. PDE issued guidance on December 4th, 2017 in the form of a memo and Q&A document. This was emailed to superintendents and chief administrators, business managers, and school nutrition program directors. We posted it on PAIRS download forms, which is the system used by school nutrition programs. It will be posted on PDE's website in the upcoming weeks. The website is under construction at the moment. This webinar will also be posted in the upcoming weeks. We recognize the topic being presented today is a delicate issue. The ultimate goal is to balance the nutritional needs of students with the financial integrity of the school. The amendments to Section 1337 require that a student who requests a school food program meal must be provided with one regardless of whether the student has the money to pay for the meal on hand or in their meal account. The only time a school may deny a student a school food program meal is when a student's parent or guardian has provided a written directive to withhold a meal. When the student owes money for 5 or more school meals, the school must make at least 2 attempts to reach the parent or guardian. The school should work with the parent or guardian to apply for participation in the school food program meal. The school must communicate directly to the parent or guardian, not the student. A student who cannot pay for a school meal or has a meal account that is in arrears may not be publicly identified or stigmatized, and that student cannot be required to perform chores or other work to pay for the meal. Also, a student who does not have the ability to pay for meals or who has incurred charges for previous school meals may not be required to discard a school meal after it was served. It's important to understand the definition of a school food program meal in the context of the amendment to Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code. As defined by school code, a school food program meal is a program under which food is served by any school on a nonprofit basis to children in attendance, including under which a school receives assistance out of funds appropriated by Congress. This last part of the definition directly refers to the federal school nutrition programs, like the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program. However, the overall definition also applies to non-federally subsidized school meal programs. Therefore, Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code applies to public schools, including charter schools, nonprofit meal programs in private and non-public schools, and schools that do not participate in federal school nutrition programs. This amendment does not apply to non-school entities. We will dive into the requirements of Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code in a little more detail. As stated, a student must be provided a school food program meal, whether they have the funds on hand or in their meal account to pay for the meal, and the student can only be denied a meal if the parent or guardian has provided a written directive to withhold a school meal. It applies to both breakfast and lunch. Schools will often provide students who do not have funds to pay for a meal with an alternative meal. Under Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code, this is no longer an option as it stigmatizes the student. The student must be offered the school food program meal options that are available to all students. Therefore, if a school has 5 school food program meal options available to students, the student without the funds to pay for the meal must have the same 5 options available to choose from. A student cannot be required to discard a meal that was served to them due to their inability to pay for the meal. When a student owes money for 5 or more meals, the parent or guardian must be notified. This is 5 or more meals combined for breakfast and lunch. The school must make at least 2 attempts to reach the parent or guardian. Communication must be directed to the parent or guardian and not the student. Letters may be sent home with the student to deliver to the parent or guardian, provided the letter is sealed in an envelope and marked confidential. Please note, this is not always the most reliable source of communication. The school can notify the parent or guardian when the meal account balances begin to run low. For example, when there's $10 left in the meal account, or prior to 5 meal charges. However, the communication must be directed to the parent or guardian and not the student. Students will frequently ask cashiers how much money they have in their meal account to ensure they have enough funds prior to making a purchase. When a student asks, food service staff may provide the meal account balance. Food service staff should be coached to handle this as discreetly as possible. Other communication methods have proven successful, especially since letters to parents delivered by students do not always reach the parent and remain at the bottom of the student's backpack. Text messages, emails, personal phone calls, and robocalls may be effective communication methods. Regardless of the communication method used or the outcome of the communication, the student must be allowed to continue to charge meals.
We're going to check on something here at the moment. Some are reporting no audio. Just give us a second. Thank you for your patience. We're going to continue. The only recommendation we could have is if you're joined by your PC and still have the call-in information to dial in by phone, then certainly can join the audio through that mechanism. Thank you.
In schools that participate in the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program, several things should be considered to ensure all students who are eligible for free or reduced meals are receiving them. Direct certification is the process by which students who are in a household receiving SNAP, TANF, or medical assistance with a qualifying income are automatically eligible for free meals. When a student begins to accrue charge balances, the school should check to see if the student has been added to the direct certification list. Schools are required to run direct certification a minimum of 3 times a year through Primero Edge. This is the system that is used for matching directly certified students against school enrollment. This list is updated weekly. As a proactive measure, schools are strongly encouraged to run this list weekly. For students that cannot be directly certified, the school may need to assist parents with completing the application for free or reduced price meals. Schools are reminded that they must provide language assistance to families whose primary language is not English. Lastly, there are a limited number of occasions when a school administrator may have firsthand knowledge about a family and know that they would qualify for free meals, but the family will not complete an application. In this instance, an administrator, such as a principal or superintendent, may complete the application. The family must be notified and they can refuse the benefit of free meals. I want to reiterate that this should be used in very limited situations. As of July 1, 2017, schools participating in the federal school nutrition programs are required to have a local meal charge policy. The purpose of the policy is to balance the nutritional needs of the students and the financial integrity of the food service account. Delinquent meal accounts extend well beyond a food service issue and are a financial issue the school must address. The local meal charge policy must address the impact on students with insufficient funds, either on hand or in their meal account, and the steps the school will take to collect the debt that has occurred. Schools must actively pursue the collection of debt incurred from charged meals. However, it is up to the school to determine the specific process they will use to pursue collection of the debt. As noted on the previous slide, one of the purposes of the local meal charge policy is to protect the financial integrity of the food service account. Therefore, the local meal charge policy must ensure that a transfer of funds will occur into the food service account from non-federal sources once the collection procedures have been exhausted. Once all of the steps of the collection procedure have been utilized, the debt is no longer considered a delinquent debt and is now considered a bad debt. A bad debt is an unallowable cost to the food service account. In many cases, the existing federal requirements and new state requirements supplement each other. Schools need to carefully review both to ensure all requirements are being met. Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code does not mandate that schools amend their local meal charge policy. However, PDE strongly recommends schools amend their policy to include these requirements of Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code so they can communicate a single, consistent, and comprehensive policy to parents and staff. In reviewing the federal and state requirements, schools will find many junctures where the policy will need to align the federal and state requirements. We will review a couple of examples. Keep in mind, as we review the examples, Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code is the state requirement, and the local meal charge policy is the federal requirement. The local meal charge policy must indicate the impact on students who do not have money on hand or in their meal account to pay for a meal. In other words, will students be permitted to charge meals if they have insufficient funds? And if so, how many meals will they be permitted to charge? The federal guidance does not stipulate that a meal must be provided. However, on the contrary, Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code stipulates that a student must be provided with a meal, whether they have funds on hand or in their account to pay for a meal. So the question of if and how many meals may be charged that must be answered in the federal local meal charge policy is dictated by Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code. Another example is the local meal charge policy requires the school to address the collection of meal charge debt. Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code does not address collection of delinquent debt. The last example is the local meal charge policy must be communicated to parents and guardians in writing each year, whereas Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code is a continuation of that and requires that schools communicate negative meal account balances directly to the parent or guardian after the student owes money for 5 or more meals and prohibits using the student as the communication channel. USDA has provided a significant amount of guidance on the requirement of a local meal charge policy as well as delinquent debts and bad debts. These memos are listed and can be found on PAIR's download forms. Additionally, USDA guidance can always be found on their website. The web address will be provided on a later slide. As stated earlier, the local meal charge policy must identify the steps the school will use to collect the money from parents or guardians for charged meals. Once the school has utilized those steps, the debt becomes a bad debt, and the food service account must be made whole for the amount of this debt, since bad debt is an unallowable charge to the food service account. The transfer of funds from non-federal sources to the food service account should occur no later than the end of the school year. Delinquent debt can only be carried to the immediate subsequent school year if it is actively being pursued per the collection procedures. In other words, if a student incurs debt towards the end of the school year, the school may not have time to pursue all of the steps in their collection procedure prior to the close of the school year. In this case, the delinquent debt can be pursued in the immediate subsequent school year. However, it is not acceptable to allow a debt for a student to carry on for multiple years. Schools may work with parents or guardians to establish payment plans, or for paid students in the school nutrition program, they may charge priced meals at a higher price or may implement the use of financial penalties if parents or guardians do not pay for the charged meals in a time period designated by the local meal charge policy. This cannot be implemented for students in the school nutrition program that have been determined eligible for reduced price meals, because the maximum amount for a reduced price breakfast is 30 cents and the maximum amount for a reduced price lunch is 40 cents, and that is per regulations. Methods to incentivize debt collection that stigmatize the students are not permitted. This includes, but is not limited to, prohibiting a student from walking at graduation or participating in extracurricular activities. It is not unusual for community organizations or individuals to gift or donate funds to directly benefit students who have insufficient funds. Schools should carefully review federal regulation in 2 CFR Part 200 prior to accepting any gifts or donations. Gifts or donations from vendors or contractors are prohibited. However, if a gift or donation is accepted, it must be coded to a separate account or fund from the food service account, because those funds cannot be commingled with revenue from state or federal reimbursement, food sales, or other sales. The gifted or donated money may be transferred to the food service account or fund at the appropriate time to offset delinquent meal accounts. The transaction will be transparent as a debit or credit in the general ledger. The local meal charge policy should dictate the process for accepting and utilizing gifts and donations, including when the transfer will occur, such as will it occur at the end of the school year or a different time period. The local meal charge policy should also establish the distribution method for the gifted or donated funds. Schools will need to determine if the funds will be used for delinquent student meal debt as a whole, or if individual students will be the beneficiary. USDA has a publication called Overcoming the Unpaid Meal Challenge, Proven Strategies from our nation's schools. There is a section that is specific to alternate funding sources. This is on PAIRS download forms and the USDA website. Since a la carte foods are generally sold as individual foods and the purpose is to generate profit, Section 1337 of the Pennsylvania School Code does not apply to a la carte food sales. Individual a la carte foods are generally available as part of a meal through the school food program meal. And the meal through the school food meal program is generally more economical. Therefore, students, including those with insufficient funds, will have access to these foods through the school food program meal. Schools may establish their own policy as it relates to allowing or disallowing students to charge a la carte food snacks. Discreteness and stigmatization should always be considered when making this decision, and schools should consult with their solicitor.
Thank you. This concludes today's webinar. Questions may be emailed to ra-nslp@pa.gov. For more information on meals for students with insufficient funds and local meal charge policies, please visit PD's website at www.education.pa.gov or visit PAIRS download forms charge policy section.